All right, hello and welcome to the final preview of the year. There will be, I think, a brief wrap-up show done to take a look at the results from this event and see the final scoreboard. But unfortunately for Yumi, it seems like the carving can begin on the trophy. We know who's going to win. The major happened, and honestly, it was a disaster. It was a disaster. We saw the playoffs. We did our preview. We're like, okay, great. These are our picks. NAVI C9 favourites. We gave massive point boosts for the underdogs just to see if we could maybe narrow the gap between me and Yumi. Instead, it sort of backfired. Outsiders went on to win, who are my underdog pick. They're the only one of our picks that scored any points. And now we're stuck here with me having a 7-point lead and Yumi, well, trailing in the dust. But hey, you can at least redeem yourself for maybe some final blows landed after the bell, I guess, at this point, and try and score some points. How are you feeling for Blast Premier?
Yeah, I'm a little scarred, to be honest. It's not it's not been good. Yeah, I think it's fair to say most people's prediction going into this major were going to be wrong. If you had any of your typical favorites, you just were never going to get that. And it was only through underdogs that we actually had any success. So props to you. Good job. You identified the outsiders. They did look like the best team entering the playoffs, like form-wise. So, with that in mind. But I don't think, we didn't do like a reevaluation or re-picking into the playoffs, did we? I don't think that was the case. It was just like our challenger stage.
No,
I
we
might have
did.
missed out on the.
So you weren't available for the show. It was Smirky filling in, but he was doing your picks. We still got your picks.
Yes.
Just to be fair to you, because he almost made you have Fury as a favorite because he didn't quite get the format initially in the first few seconds, which was a bit awkward. I was like, oh, hold on, that cannot be right. I mean, he was almost correct to have done that because they did end up upsetting Navi immediately. And I started quaking in my boots, thinking, "Oh no, he's going to run it back. He's about to run the table."
It was a cool idea. Like I thought the Furious story was always going to be niche and a nice. It's just like a very naive thing to think that the crowd would just make the difference in every single game, and it just ends up not being the case. There's only so much of a high you can take, and hell, even against Heroic, they could have definitely won that series, but they came back massively on Ancient and then just couldn't close, and that was the real turning point. They just looked like they sort of checked out on the final map. So there was a world where we could have seen Furia in a final. We could have seen Furia outsiders, and that could have been our little underdogs head to head. But not to be, not this time.
That'd have been crazy. Yeah, that would have been an absolutely insane game for us to watch personally. Furia just fell apart in map 3. That was unfortunate for them. As we come into this event, we've got myself on top of the world, but we still got picks to make. We still got teams to talk about. This event is a bit weird. I mean, I've complained endlessly about the way Blast format their events. It's, as I've always stated, it's kind of hard to make them seem iconic, historic, super important when they have names that look like government agency textbooks, like your training manual for the Blast Premier Fall, Spring, Final. Why? Just give it a good name. Call this the Blast Copenhagen. I don't care how you run the system beyond that. Just give them good names. And they just haven't. So we're here at the Blast Premier Falls Finals preview. We're going to pick some teams. Yumi, I'm going to let you pick your favourite first, because that's how it worked behind the scenes. So who you got for us?
First off, I don't hate the naming totally from the Blast side. That's your grievance.
Fine, but you can like it.
I just think it's seasonal. Legally. They're just trying to make it a seasons thing. And one season that I think, or at least one team that's not gone out of season, is FaZe. I would like to pick them as my favorites coming in, which is, considering where they ended up placing in and amongst the major. Yeah, maybe the confidence is a bit lost, but I don't think we should forget just how good this team looked. This is an event that isn't going to be affected by the Intel Grand Slam. I think there's definitely a mental hurdle that FaZe are having to go through. They kept making excuses like, oh, well, we've got ESL Pro League. Oh, well, we've got the major coming up. That just builds up more pressure. In fact, winning the Grand Slam and the major, I don't think that they had it in them. But for this event, I think FaZe could do quite well for themselves. This would be a nice little confidence booster. They don't have to worry about the implications of them making it to the World Finals as well, because they've already made it, from my understanding. So there is a decent chance that FaZe come in with a reset focus because they understand that they underperformed going into the major, and this is a team that have very high caliber players.
Yeah, no, they are still one of the most dangerous teams. I had them, honestly, in all my pick'ems prior to them failing to get out of the group, so I had them going straight through, no worries. I think I even had a little gamble on to see them make the major final, because I thought, they're just that team. They're that good. But yeah, as you said, maybe it was that extra pressure that got to them. Weren't able to hit their shots. Weren't able to really deliver, execute at the highest level. So no, here at the DFS Full Sail, finals preview. Just hate this naming system. I'm going to keep riding on it until the day I die. They do look really good, like set to make a good run. Sure, they have to go through a little bit of competition. They have Heroic in their group, who showed us some really good stuff at the major. But no, I think it's a really good pick. Doubters are going to doubt. But at the end of the day, winners are going to win. And I think FaZe are still pretty much set up to be one of the biggest winners of this year. It's not going to be as dominant as ramp as it seemed it would be after the first major of the year. We thought they'd really seal this year off, make it a dominant era, an all-time moment. Instead, it's just been a nice little footnote that they were pretty much the best team. And here they can really add a bit to that, a little icing on that cake. Myself, it is a Heroic pick. Our two favourites are going to go head-to-head in the group. I thought Heroic, losing that final to Outsiders, looked like a difference of which team prepares their young fraggers better in terms of the mental game. It just seemed like a mental prep difference. Outsiders look so cold. No matter what they were doing, they just looked ice cold. James stayed calm as he always does, but then also he managed to sort of exude all that feeling into his players. They all look so dead set, just assassins, and that's unfortunate for Heroic. They weren't able to be as calm under that big pressure. Here it's a little less. They're going to come back. They're going to start hitting their shots again. I don't have any real doubts about them. I think they're going to go deep in this event, and in my eyes, I think they're going to win the entire thing, but we'll see how it actually ends up turning out. What were your thoughts, Yumi, on their run at the major?
Yeah, I think that for the most part, they had a very contained and pretty methodical style. I think that's something that Heroic have always been good at doing, is that they can sort of push one way, but then immediately subvert your expectations. And they have players that can sort of overperform or be stars. You have players like Stown, or even Yabi to a certain degree. I wasn't really a massive believer of him when he joined this team, but he has slowly been finding more and more impact frags in crucial rounds for this squad. So it starts to make this more justified. Making the major final definitely justifies some of those decisions. But I think, worried for Heroic that because they came so close and they had such a meltdown in the finals, that they are going to have a bit of a mental bounce back to have to do. And I don't think this is going to be the tournament where they just hit their stride and immediately find success. Because we do talk about them being a young squad, and we talk about, Cadian's got some good leadership attributes. He definitely knows how to coax them up. I think Heroic even put out on Twitter, a little rallying cry from Cadian after they lost, and just realized this wasn't our tournament. We didn't play as good, and that's just the way it is. I think even with that, it's still just gonna to weigh on their minds that they go from a major final to now in a fight back against the rest of the world, and have to do more of what they did at the major, but to a lesser degree. It's a lesser tournament. At the Blast Full Finals, I do, for transparency's sake, I do some of the qualifiers for some of their showdown events and all that sort. It's not going to have the same sort of it's not as big of an achievement to win this event versus what the implications are for the major. So I just think that's going to weigh heavy on them.
No, I get that. Yeah, as I think I alluded to just pre-show, it's always the tier 2 teams who go make those upset runs happen. They seem to have post-major blues, and I think we'll see maybe a lesser version of that. It all comes down to that NIP game in the opener. If they just smash NIP, just outplay them, knock their boots off, just completely clean them out, then I think, they just come straight back into it. If they struggle with that game, even if they do close it out, but it's close, maybe, what you're talking about will come into effect. But I'm confident enough that they will be able to bounce back, able to show off and frag out. And Yabi, an interesting point. Sorry, this came to mind when you mentioned him. Something that he was pretty apparent in Codename Flames was that he was a bit more of a playmaker. Out of the two prospects, the two young guys, him and Zyphon, he was more the jack in the box, can make something happen. And you saw, bits of that start to come through more and more at the major. Sure, his ratings aren't going to be crazy, not yet. He's not going to be one of your big time carries consistently round map to map, but he does have rounds where he just goes, finds miracles. Honestly, he came so close to converting some rounds on Ancient, especially against Fury, where I was he had no chance even making that close. and some of them he even managed to like bring over the line. So great to see that playmaking from him. And yeah, Heroic, my pick for favorites. Yumi, underdogs, a lot of interesting picks here. Who have you gone with?
Okay, well, upon reflection, I have realized that I've kind of boxed myself into a bit of a corner here because I have selected 2 teams from the same group. So I might just end up I might just fuck me, I guess. I have chosen OG as my underdogs. I really believed in them going into the challenger stage, and I still think that there were certain games that were influenced by external factors that made the challenger stage more difficult than it needed to be. There were quite a few tech issues at the major. I felt like OG were a team that were affected by them 3 times.
Yeah, they got hit by a lot of them.
Yeah, and it didn't always seem to matter. One of them was in a game I think that they ended up winning anyway. I think it was Greyhound. They had like a 2-hour tech pause that they had to still deal with, and they still won. Or maybe it was shorter than that. It might have been like a half hour, 45 minutes.
It was long, but it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't quite 2 hours. I think by that point, just get a new PC in.
But then we had this massive media circus afterwards of Dexter, going at ESL, then ESL going back at Dexter, saying like, "Oh, you're not telling the full story. You're not telling the story accurately," and all this external nonsense that you really shouldn't be having to think about at the major. You should just be thinking about, I want to play this game. We might have to face a harder team in the next round. Oh well, we'll beat them. Or, doing prep work and stuff like that. But instead they had to worry about like what was in their configs and all this other nonsense. So I like this OG team. I think that they've got more than enough sort of explosive firepower to make it past anyone like a Heroic and an IP. Hell, even a NAVI, to be honest. I don't think NAVI showed their best form at the major. I think OG could be in a prime position to get some nice little upsets under their belt. I know that in the events where they have been marked as sort of like favorites or even a prospective team to make it into the finals, they have underperformed, in fact. Melbourne was a clear example of that. So
yeah.
I do think that they are still on an upward trajectory, and I think this could be a nice little crowning achievement to at least get out of this group and show the rest of these teams what they're made of.
Yeah, well, here's the problem for you, though. If they make it out in third, for example, if they lose to your favourite, or if your favourite finishes first, they then face each other in the semis. It's become a bit of
I've kind of messed myself up here.
A messy situation. So you kind of want them to finish second, which, it involved Heroic finishing top of the group, probably, or an IP. It's one hell of a weird one. But no, OG is a team a lot of people had their eye on, especially those who, follow the up-and-comers, these young players who've seen them play for a long time online, and finally getting them a real chance in OG has been great. Yet some of the LAN struggles have been a bit disappointing. Melbourne you brought up for me was one of the shockers. I was sat there like, this should be a field you kind of trounce. Like, guys, what are we playing at? And I think part of that is just, getting used to being in a team that's expected to travel, expected to play on LAN. It's a very different environment. No, you're right about the fragging, 100%. They have the players to just pop off and win any game. Dexter is crazy good. Sure, Spirit somehow found an almost equivalent replacement in Wonderful, Ready, but that's the CIS for you. They just have an endless stream of AWPers. Yeah. Dexter's great fragger. Neofrag, FlameZ, and Fiku all have explosive potential. FlameZ has been the most consistent of the 3 so far. Also has the most experience. But yeah, this core is dangerous, and under the leadership of Nexo, they could achieve dangerous, deep runs and be an upset potential team. So I can see why you've picked OG here. It's a shame about the whole group logistics, but
yeah, I literally selected the teams without even thinking about how the groups match up, and I realized I might have put myself into a bit of a dark corner here.
Yeah, you kind of have, but the way we do favorites and underdogs has meant that I've been able to pick G2 as an underdog, which I didn't think would really be available. But when you think about their form, the way they just absolutely bombed at the big events recently, you're like, yeah, fair enough. No one should be calling them a favourite. But I think G2 here is just a free pick. Like, a lot of people still doubt HooXi. I'm never going to defend his fragging. I have no intention of doing that. I just simply believe this team works if Nico frags and if Munzi and Hunter don't completely disappear. If they're like their 1.15 selves, I'm going to use ratings, just, we know what that means in terms of serve performance. They're their 1.15 selves, and Nico's got the freedom to go and find all the opening fights, take his picks at his tempo, do his thing. This team probably just just is a top 5 team. Like, it's just good enough. A lot of people doubt JKS still, and I'll admit I still have my reservations. I do believe he needs to be the #1 guy on a team to truly progress. Get set up for all the fights, get his spots. The way FaZe kind of treated him, where they were just like, we're gonna set you up for these fights, just go hit heads. Like, I do believe he thrives in that sort of environment, and here he's not going to get that attention. But again, I don't think he's going to be a net negative. And as long as those key factors, those big fragger factors, like show up, put out the performances we expect from them, this team should upset the apple cart. They're better than 5th best at this event, basically. And that's how I've hedged my bets here. Also helps, they're not in my favourites group.
Yeah.
They're actually in the easier group, by the looks of it. Kind of all over the shop Liquid, Fluxo, and a NAVI look a bit weak. I don't know how you're feeling about that group, but to me it seems like they've got the easier of the two.
Hey, all I'm saying is I'm keeping my eye on Fluxo, because they're one of the few instances where a showdown team from the open qualifier circuit, or from like on the qualifier circuit that they have for the showdowns, has made it to this next stage. I think Fury has done it before. I guess the South American region might be the most vulnerable to having like these small little upsets. But yeah, it's just a cool group to look at. I definitely back the argument here for G2. I think that them as a team, like, we were looking at them being contenders for the major prior to their failure to make it out of challenger stage. We were really looking at G2 as a title contender, kind of alongside Vitality, who also underperformed. Like, the major does feel like it's a little bit detached from the conversation now, because we had so many upsets that really, can we be confident in anyone?
True.
I do still think that HooXi was a stopgap in-game leader, and I have a problem with that, to be honest. Xtaz, rumored to be, or I guess is out. They've shifted in-game leaders, so now they've shifted their coach. Was Xtaz holding the hooks back? My Giga Chad, I don't feel like his brain is influencing the rest of the team enough. And can they bounce back mentally? Because that's always been an issue for teams, especially with Nico on it, has been how do they recover mentally to then compete at the next event? Because they understand that they should be able to achieve greatness. Like, these are great players that are constantly touted as some of the best in the world, and yet the achievements don't rack up alongside that. Like, that dawns on you, and big failures hurt the most. They might cut the deepest. So again, I guess similar to the sort of caveat that I had for Heroic, I am worried about the mentality of G2 coming into this, because this is our first time seeing them since what the major offered.
Well, to be fair, small correction. They didn't fail at the challenges. They didn't make the challenges. They failed at the RMR, which is not better at all. But it has given them more time to practice. And yeah, the Xtaz leaving thing, I think it's become pretty clear that he chose to leave. Like, it's what it seemed to me, just the number of things he said on his streams. Like, he just feels like he made terrible decisions and has now left. Like, he just, it kind of wasn't his team by the end, and he wasn't happy with the way it was going and left. Is that better for HooXi? I don't know. I wouldn't really want to guess on that, if it's better or worse to not have your, a pretty tenured, pretty experienced coach behind you. Maybe it does allow him to implement more of his style, that slightly looser, slightly more pick-based style. What I did like, something that I noticed, every time they make a big change, they then finish second at the next event, pretty much. It happened at Katowice, it happened at, was it Pro League? Oh, which event was it recently? Where they smashed the group and finished top 4 or something like that. They get good placements after making changes like this. It's essentially my point.
Mm-hmm.
So consider that a whole load of hopium, because that's all it is. It's not analysis. It's just,
it's a weird trend analysis that you've gone for.
Semi-trend that's just like, hey, it's a little buff. I mean, I believe already in the players. I already believe in what is the system. What little there is to think about, because we don't really know what's going to happen, considering they've changed coach. Haven't seen them for a while. Last thing we saw was disastrous. I've seen enough there to be happy with them as an underdog pick. But that little tidbit of hopium just pushes it over the line.
I mean, well, it was Pro League before the RMR said we really did think that they were gonna do some damage. So yeah, if they're able to find that form again and just be able to reset back to that, I don't think that anybody has any real. I don't have any issues with you selecting G2. but I am still preying on their downfall. If there is ever a way for me to
yeah.
make it out, people need to just not do anything at this event on your end, and I don't even think theoretically I can still come back. But just for pride's sake, I want.
If your underdog
that.
and favorite both make the final, you can earn, believe, 4 points. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if your underdog makes the final and wins, that's 3. If your favorite makes the final, that's another 1. Yeah, it's maximum 4 points. So that'd bring you.
Yeah, just for 3. My pride, man. It's nothing else, you know.
Yeah, to reach double digits would be good. That'd be a nice goal to achieve.
Just for myself. Fun.
Honestly, it's all for a good cause anyway. As we established in an episode quite a while ago, it's called Money on the Line in all caps, something like that. The loser does donate to charity. It doesn't go to my pocket. If I finish first, you finish second, and vice versa. It's all for charity, so it's all for a good cause. But still it's still pride on the line, really. Like that's the big thing. It's pride. So it'd be nice to get some back, obviously. Let's talk about some other teams. NAVI. They got upset by Furia, and they didn't look particularly brilliant leading up to it, I didn't think. Like, the upset was a shock still, but the fact that they lost BO1s to Cloud9 and the Liquid, and then didn't feel that resoundingly comfortable in the 2 BO3s they won. Like, sure, they won them, especially the Bad News Eagles they smashed, let's just get out of the way, but
yeah.
I felt like Big, that should have been an equally just smash them and leave. And it ended up being, I don't know, Big getting double digits. I felt like they had to kind of pull themselves across the line in those ones. How do you feel about them coming into this event? Because I'm not happy with their form, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely had a hard road to get into the playoffs in the first place. People will talk about how the things were seeded in the major and going into the legend stage, and that's some of the errors of the format, some of the errors of the teams that were considered favorites in the first place. But even without that, Navi looked a little shaky. They looked rough around the edges, where I think we were maybe looking at earlier events and thinking like, oh, how is the shift of in-game leader responsibilities to Electronic, and how are they going to make that all work? Electronic was playing out of his mind for a lot of those tournaments that they were participant to. Yeah. And even with him taking those responsibilities, it seemed to almost like empower him somehow. I think this event was more in line with expectations. Like, Electronic was still having some big impact moments, but wasn't taking over games like he was when he first took over in-game leading responsibilities. And that just looked like it was unsustainable in the first place. Like, no one expects their in-game leader to be their highest performer, especially on a rifle. Like, it just doesn't really
not
happen
long term, really, do you?
Yeah.
That's not really a thing. But then, well, I think the other part you might be about to touch on, it was Bit who also massively underperformed, right? It wasn't just Electronic.
Yeah, a few of their stars went missing. I mean, first off, I think people are very critical of Sumdai Young as one of the players. Like, if you want another star to come in, like, Electronic is still doing those responsibilities just better. He is just better than SDY. And yeah, the fact that Bit has not been able to show himself in the same way that we had him as like rookie of the year almost coming out of 2021. 2022 hasn't treated him as well. That again has not been a sustainable factor. Start of the year looked okay, I think, but it's like slowly deteriorated as the year has gone on. So I think alongside him and Perfecto, like Perfecto's a hard one to always quantify because it's almost like contingent on his amount of clutches he wins in games, because Perfecto can almost always bail you out of bad situations, but they ended up in a lot of bad situations, and Perfecto can't bail you out of every single one.
Yeah, no, you can't expect him to just whip out a 100 clutch season like every single year. Like, that's pretty a rarefied thing to achieve, and yeah, that's not what he's expected to really be here. He's not really supposed to be clutching every single round, and he ended up being the highest rated rifler for them at this event, behind Simple, who had, well, a good event if you're anyone else. Him, Zaiwu, Shiro would consider this an underperformance. Everyone else, if that's your AWP, you're like, oh, nice. Where'd everyone else go wrong? But yeah, that was really an underperformance for him. The Furia series, he looked, I don't want to say muted, like, but that's kind of what comes to mind. Like, it just wasn't Simple. Like, he wasn't the line, the king of the jungle. Like, he wasn't looking himself. So you've got to bet on them recovering, I think, if you're, a Navi believer in this event. And clearly, neither one of us particularly is. I think it's more like we're waiting till a change happens. I think
yes,
there's one more change in the pipeline for Navi. SDY is not the full-time replacement, as much as I think he's done a fine job, like for most of this time period. I think another change has to happen, and I do believe it has to surround either bringing in another star to allow Electronic to fully submerge himself into leadership, or more likely, bring in a leader. I think one of those two things has to happen.
But who do you even identify like that? The biggest problem is always going to be who you end up scouting out, and do they pass the Blade barometer? Because I feel like he is kind of the be and all. He needs to be able to cooperate with his in-game leader to such a massive amount. Probably why they chose Electronic. I feel like they probably get on quite well, like just systematically. Even Blade's very straight shooting. It's like, oh yeah, Electronic is still learning some things about the role, and you know he's obviously trying to take on those responsibilities and shoulder them for the team. But yeah, I feel like there's going to be a long interview process if they do ever get another in-game leader, and it might take months potentially just for Blade to be like, yeah, you know what, you're okay. We can work with this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just don't know who they pick up, because I think they have an maybe it's a very conscious decision, but they are sort of opting for Ukrainian players, and then that like there's only such a limited pool of prospective talents to bring into that conversation. So
right, yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah, I think well the general issue seems to be, you know, not Russian. Like they can't bring in Russian players, which is a lot of the IGLs people have in mind who think they could bring into a CIS team are going to be Russian players. The names you see floated about are guys like Jerry, Chopper, you know, other IGLs we've seen a few bits recently aren't an option for Navi, just based on what they've stated. One rumor I've seen today, which would kind of go more towards the, I guess, bringing in a star who can also second call a bit. It's a very unsubstantiated, weak rumor, but would be Hobbit, somehow making that move happen. Do you have any quick thoughts on that? Would you like to see that? Do you think it'd have any success?
God, it would just burn me, because I think Cloud9 would end up just full like. I understand I have an unhealthy bias with Cloud9, because I always think this is the event that they're gonna win the event, and then they just do nothing. So I understand that I have to catch myself a little bit, but I do think that would almost maybe burn Cloud9, because that was the one change that seemed to make them a contender team in 2020. So
yeah, I don't like it for Cloud9 at all. Like when I saw that room, I was like, why would Cloud9 ever do that?
But it'd be alright for Navi, yeah.
Yeah, because on Navi he's not been as much of a star return to land 2022 year, but he still had really good events where he's far outperformed Axile even. Axile's had some really down events. And also he can help second call. He does clearly fit into a team that can win events. He's done it before, he'll do it again, I have no doubt. So I thought that would make sense for Navi. Like, it'd be a slam dunk move for them. Just made no sense from a Cloud9 point of view. Pretty much. Let's look. At this event, we've got one more team who we haven't really discussed, and that's Liquid, who are kind of in that favourite pool, just based on their ranking. Neither one of us picked them, but it's I think it's a little more clear-cut why. Like, this isn't a team who we're expecting to win events still, right? I mean, we're on the same page on that. I think they're not quite ready there.
Yeah, I actually think, you know, we had conversations, I think, previously about how good Yakindar was, and how it seems like he's sort of taken over the control of Liquid, and it is now Yakindar's team, not Elige's or Nav's team or anybody that's been there longer than him. It is now Yakindar's team. The problem is, now that he's officially signed with them, it almost... I do wonder about some of the internal politics for this squad, because while you're doing the rehearsals, you know, you're there for an unknown amount of time. You don't know if you're going to end up getting bought out or not. You might be a little bit more loose with how you sort of communicate, and you know, you're unsure about whether this is a long-term home or just a short stay. So you're kind of living up the party life, and you know, just like when you see your friends out in the, you know, your day-to-day life, and you might meet up for coffees, drinks, you might even see each other for the majority of the days, but you're not living with them. And when sometimes moving in with your best friend can be one of the worst decisions you ever make, because your living habits will just be completely different. I feel like there might be some internal politics that are going to hurt Liquid in the long run, because some of the deep changes they might need to do in the team might hurt feelings. And that is going to be a conversation I think Liquid have to get to, because, you know, we still have the conversation about what is Nitro's role on this team, really. And is it affected by Yakindar's presence? Is it Yakindar helping him? If he is helping him a lot, why not just get another player? And as much as Captain America is a cool symbol for Liquid to have, it's also just, you know, it might not be sustainable if they want to actually have achievements under this organization. So, yeah, Liquid just don't feel like they're there yet, because their stars are fine. I think AleksiB with Yakindar and OC, you know, there was maybe some variance there. NAF is usually some of the variance changer. You know, somebody's having a poor performance, NAF can sometimes just like step in and way overperform. So yeah, just one. It feels like they're a change away for me.
Okay. Yeah, the biggest issue I've had is watching them play is I rarely see AleksiB just be a carry, be AleksiB. Like, he seems to have been kind of pushed out of the limelight a bit by Yakindar, and for the better initially. Like, you know, they got their performances improved, but now slowly he's gotten more and more embedded. His style has its downfalls, its drawbacks, and they've seen a lot more of that recently. So, yeah, I agree with your point about Nitro. We could see a change there in maybe the coming months. Depends on how they do. If they bounce back, AleksiB starts being able to, you know, drag out in his roles. Honestly, that probably makes a big difference for them, because if you look at things like the EPL final, it was mostly NAF outside of Yakindar and OC. Like, in terms of the riflings, NAF, AleksiB, it was NAF. Like, he was the guy stepping up. He was the problem, the tick. They had to dig out bomb sites. He was the guy bringing up those big multi-kills when they needed them in the post-round, post-plant. That was the guy. And AleksiB needs to be, I think, more present, more of a assertive, dominant force. And yeah, so far he hasn't been. If that changes, we might see a massive wait before Nitro goes. Like, if AleksiB is able to also step back in and they start finishing top 4 more often, they start actually being kind of dangerous, yeah, I don't think that change happens. But I agree. Long term, Nitro isn't really a fixture for me. He's a piece of art you can unhang.
He was always sort of touted as like the glue guy before in Liquid. So like when he left first initially, people were like, oh, well, now people won't get on and the vibe is different and it's all changed. So him coming in might actually just be more of a like an environmental thing. But if that's the case, you know, maybe you just have him as a part of the staff behind the game instead of in the server. I don't know.
Yes, switch him with Dabs.
Yeah, maybe.
That could be the move. I'm sure there's someone out there who's calling for it. Dabs back to the IGL. Nitro on the coach. I mean, if he's a great hype man and he's able to, I think, rein in some of the more negative aspects of certain players' personalities that we've heard about. I think we've all heard about. Mm-hmm. That's probably a positive aspect, positive thing you can still bring. But
and you can always comfortably get a coffee with Nitro, I believe.
Okay. Okay. That's one job you can have on a team. Just have a coffee.
Yeah.
Be that guy who's just sat in the break room like, oh, you're right. Yeah. Okay. A bit of an odd role. Let's briefly touch on NIP. They smashed through the RMR, leading everyone to go, oh, they could go 3-0 in the Challenger stage. Well, they went straight to contenders, didn't they? And then they went 0-3, losing to Fnatic, Outsiders, and Sprout. So that's it. We've got like the yin and the yang. Like, combined, where do you see them after all this? Do you think AleksiB's integrated now, or is it just... who knows? I
don't know, man. I didn't want to put NIP through. I'll put this right now. Okay. I put them on my pick'ems because everybody I spoke to about it just kept going like, oh, but Nip looked great at the RMRs and all. You know, I think they're gonna hit their stride. AleksiB is gonna like. I got like brainwashed with the amount of people that said NIP were gonna go through that I was like, yeah, maybe they do. Maybe they do. But then, oh my god. Positive affirmation. They just bomb out. I wasn't even sad that they didn't go through in the end. I still struggle to understand why Esatag is there if he is not going to do the role that he was brought in to do. He doesn't have his Danish comrade anymore. Rez is now AWPing. I think in terms of just ceiling to hit, Esatag's AWP and Rez's AWP, Rez might be just slightly higher. But when it comes to rifling, Rez is much higher. So I would rather see Esatag here with the AWP and Rez up here, potentially, instead of just having this whole role shuffle about. I thought when AleksiB came in, honestly, that they were going to just shift that back and be like, no, this is stupid. Rez, you rifle. Because Rez himself has even said, like, he didn't want to AWP, but he was basically told or convinced by the team, like, because he had secondary AWP before, to take over the role entirely. Which is just, like, even if he's not the one that's pushing for it, then why on earth is he the one that's primary AWPing?
No,
it doesn't make sense to me.
Little to no sense. No, that's odd. But yeah, NIP are missing an AWPer, essentially, is what we're at. That's where we're at.
Dude, and think about what, Apex, that Apex team with what, Stiko and Nork and Chauzy and all that.
Yeah.
Think about if they just let Chauzy AWP and they just had one AWPer, maybe Nork is still floating around in free agency or doing whatever, they would have 2 potential AWPers to pick from. But now nobody's talking about Chauzy. Now Nork is sort of seen as not being at the right level. Now they have no options. Like, I don't understand why we've cut down all these other prospective AWPers, and now we're left with this version of NIP as the final product.
It's a weird one. Especially when you look at the Swedish scene in terms of what AWPers are available. Because you just mentioned 2 of basically the 3 that I can think of that are, like, kind of touted as AWPers to come through. You might not know it, but Joel also.
Right.
That time, AWPer. It's a bit weird because him and Chauzy spend a lot of time on the same teams, where at times neither one of them AWPed, and yet both of them have AWPed primarily for teams. It's a whole fiasco, but essentially you could bring back Nork, who looked pretty, not grey, but looked competent prior to being cut from NIP. Or you can take a risk on these young kids who are mechanically absolutely wilding. They're crazy. Like Joel and Chauzy are both, like, they have wrists given to them by the gods. Let's just put it that way. They're crazy mechanically skilled, and you could take a risk on one of them, or you could go a final, I think less insane route and just get FaZe out of Sangal. Like, you had him, you guys somehow made things happen with him. He showed on Sangal that he can deliver on a decent enough level under stress, and he did that with you as well. So just, I don't know, just ring him up. Like, it wouldn't be the hardest contract to buy out, and you've got a bit of money back from reselling Device back.
Like, hey, old pal, you ready to go for one last rodeo?
Yeah, this time it's for real though. Like, this time we actually want you. You're not just filling in. Like, I think that'd be a good idea, just to get FaZe back in even. But yeah, this team's missing an AWPer. That's essentially what it is. Like, it makes no sense to have these riflers filling in crazy roles they don't really do. Just bring him back. Like, just do something like that. Genuinely perplexed by a lot of what I've seen in terms of the roster construction from NIP. I agree, this event, probably they're not going to look brilliant. If they do make it through again, it'll be a crazy, like, overperformance from Hampus, like, doing nuts stuff, and Rez looking beyond what he actually is on an AWP. I think that's what it's going to look like for them to make it through.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And the problem I have is that, like, we obviously talk a lot about AleksiB. He's I think one of the people that we've attached characteristics to as an in-game leader, whether it's like micromanagement or whether it's how he converses with his players or what his mind for the game is. In fact, don't think anybody really doubts that he's a pretty like well thought out guy when it comes to the tactics of the game. But he has not had a success on any of his rosters since ENCE. That's just the truth of it. OG never made a major. G2 didn't make the major. And, I guess he wasn't a part of that adventure, but leading up to it, they didn't look good either.
No.
And now with NIP, he has to be able to prove that he can in-game lead to a certain degree, or just take control of this roster. Like, it depends how much freedom NIP is going to give him to, like, reconstruct and change roles around, get new players, perhaps. But he has to find some kind of success for people to keep sort of ringing true about how good of an in-game leader he is. In-game leaders are categorically defined by the success of the team. You cannot be a top level in-game leader and not be competitive at the top end. Like, Hampus, for all accounts, did a decent enough job keeping NIP close in content, like always being that dark horse performer team for a long time.
All
like
the BS, yeah.
Yes, and everybody was talking shit about NIP, but Hampus was still sort of chugging away and thinking like, oh wow, he's actually still pretty sick, and this team is somehow doing better than we expect. They need to at least hit that floor for me, for AleksiB to have any justification for being on this roster, because, like, yeah, he was a free agent in-game leader, and maybe he didn't cost that much, I don't know what the negotiations were like, but you imagine he's quite a star buy I think he still has a lot of sort of public stock.
Yep.
So he needs to be able to justify that price point.
No, agreed. Yeah, especially when you say IGLs, it's a result-based sort of profession. Like, yeah, doesn't matter how good the theory is. Like, you have the perfect plan. If it never gets executed, no matter like what players you have around you are, really you're an issue. Like, whatever your idea is, it's just wrong.
Dude, I mean, like, Copenhagen Flames and Hooksy, like, you think about the career that Hooksy has had, all the other pieces of Copenhagen Flames make it to the major, and there he is, just sat in G2, just like, you know, he was defined by how good Copenhagen Flames were, and now with G2, if he can't do the same with them, like, he's in the bin. I don't care if your memes are good, like, people aren't gonna like you.
Memes be screwed. Yeah, that's why one of the most important parts I've always brought up for judging an IGL's like current value is number of rosters you've actually had success with. Like, that's a massive part. It's part of what makes Karrigan the greatest, is the fact that he's taken so many rosters of varying like origin, varying culture, varying skill level to title contention. Other IGLs yet, like clearly we can see Hooksy so far hasn't made it work. He hasn't had a lot. He's a very niche example in that sense, but AleksiB is the perfect one, where he was able to win events with Ents, and since then has done diddly squat. Like, so he has to show some results with someone else, otherwise you just say, yeah, he can only make it work with this one iteration of Ents. Like, really? Is that is going to
the one iteration where they wanted him gone? They didn't even we want to have fun.
Like, it's working, but at what cost? At what cost? Huh. You never take the Finns to be that much of a fun-loving people. Hey, apparently.
Yeah.
Behind all the scowls, there are some smiles. So that's kind of where we're at with NIP. I think that's all the teams I want to talk about. You said enough about Fluxo, in my opinion. Like, just, oh yeah, they made it through the North America region, which is the Brazil qualifier. Yeah, all right, cool.
Also, I'll just say it, keep your eye out on Lux and Luke Halsey. Both those guys, pretty sick. Like, Lux had, people don't know who Lux is, basically. Like, he's a small-time team sort of player. Everybody else has got deep careers, but Lux is the one that's kind of coming in as the plucky up-and-comer, and he's sick.
Okay. All right, I'll keep an eye out, because that's not really a name I was familiar with on this team. Like, I knew the guys who had been around, you know, in my BR days, Phelps even back to SK, you know. But yeah, Lux is a new one for me, so hopefully he does some things, and it was worth actually watching. Otherwise, you've made me waste my time. How could you?
You're gonna watch that Navi game anyway, I mean, maybe, I don't know.
I should do, unless it's scheduled at some ridiculous time. 3 o'clock on a Wednesday. Ooh, I'm in the office, never mind. Not watching it.
Okay, I'll give you the Sparks notes or something.
Yeah, please. Or I find one of those YouTube highlight videos where they just show one player's POV. For some reason, there's not one for every single player in the scene. It's weird. Like, they only do the big names that attract clicks. I don't know why. It's weird, that.
It's YouTube algorithm stuff, man. I don't know how it works.
Yeah, that's clearly what it is. You could actually make a decent amount. Anyway, I'm getting lost on a tangent here that I feel like it's going to go on way too long. So I'm just going to call it, and I can go write about that in my diary maybe, but it's for a different video if anything. Yeah, thanks again for joining me. This has been kind of the first season of these preview shows. I'm sure if we do more, we could get better branding for it than just preview. Ta-da. Watch it. We're going to call it the preview. It's been good. Honestly, I'm surprised I came out on top. I thought so many of my wacky picks would actually come back to bite me in the ass, but turns out just picking outsiders in the major wins it all for you. Just got to follow your heart, guys. That's the secret. And stop thinking you're all doing wrong. Yeah, hopefully this is a good event. I think for them to actually, for Blast to ever compete with the ESL, they actually have to have quality Counter-Strike and better branding. And hopefully this at least does one of those things, because the Counter-Strike could be brilliant.
Can I just hijack this for one moment? You know, we're in the month of November. You know, we're talking about charity, and you know, eventually I might have to just give up. You know, because I don't think I can win. But yeah, donations to charity, those are always good things to support. I know Movember is going on, so I think Mustache Masters is also going on. You can see I'm a very biologically reluctant participant in growing them. It's not my choice. Blame my genes for this. So that, I think the Mustache Masters is on at the moment. So yeah, you know, check them out. They're doing stuff for Movember and, you know, mental health, I think prostate cancer. It's a bunch of different causes all sort of lumped into one in the month of November. So, you know, if you're thinking about giving yourself out there, then, you know, check them out.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I usually most years I have done my own Movember, but this year I didn't. So I threw some money at someone else who's running it in the scene. I think it was Neokai. He's doing a Movember thing. He's got special streams on. All the proceeds from his streams, I gave to his one instead. Try and get that one up to the 3-4 digits or something like that, because he's put a really conservative goal of like £200. Like, smash that. Let's get that way up. Like, it should be a cause we're actually willing to support as a scene, considering we are like 99% dudes. Like, it's our balls and butts we're talking about here. So let's get it done. Yeah. We'll see you in the next one. I think the next video is just going to be a brief, like, conclusion, wrap up, maybe show some receipts.
Yeah.
And then it's off to the holidays to eat too much, drink too much, and come back nice and fluffy. All right. Goodbye.